Hello everyone. If you are new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do it, thanks. By the way, I also have a Luffy fan fiction channel. If you are interested, the link is in the description. Rikudou, the One Above All by Novus Maximus. An extraordinary man dies, Naruto of course, in one world and awakes in another. A genius unrivaled in the use of his abilities that he once thought to be mere fiction. Witness the rise of the pillar of strength that shall hold the world up with the godly power that is within all. For he is the one avatar of the six paths reborn upon this world. He will be extremely overpowered and will have Renegan and EMs. I don't own anything, adios.
Whatever I had expected this battle to be, this wasn't it. I had thought that All Might was joking when he told me about AFO's power, but if anything, his stories were watered down. After I spat a fireball in his face, All for One used a combination of quirks to almost recreate Pain's attack on the village in the Narutoverse. I say almost because this one didn't sweep away most of the buildings in Kamino, yet. Though, it did send me flying along with All Might. I right myself to control my flight before I smack into one of the many helicopters that are currently buzzing about, looking curiously at the fight below. Fools, the lot of them. Despite the prevalence of quirks in the world, it's an inescapable fact that some are simply more capable than others. For journalists to even attempt to get close to such a fight, it's nothing short of suicidal. With a simple burst of wind-style chakra from my hands, I am once again heading towards AFO. He saw me coming and prepared to swat me out of the sky. I instantly brought forth a torrent of wind-natured chakra in my throat. Wind style. Air bullet. This had two effects. Firstly, it blew me off my previous course, and secondly, it forced AFO to dodge or block it. At any rate, that means that he wasted valuable time dealing with it. Especially in a battle like his one, time is of the utmost essence. A single second, no, even a tenth of a second can spell the difference between victory and defeat. The very second that my feet touched the ground, I was off. Cyan blue lightning flashed around me as the ground broke under the tremendous strain of my kickoff. Unlike any other time I might have used the lighting chakra armor, I wasn't playing around today. The near same instant I landed, I once again accelerated, this time to well beyond Mach speeds. The air around me shattered with a massive boom as I raced towards my foe. AFO reacted just as fast and put a solid guard against my punch. The earth shattered under the force of our blows as we were both pushed back. AFO didn't even have the time to properly land that he was on the receiving end of a particularly vicious smash from All Might. This sent him flying in the opposite direction. I once again came forth intending to land another supersonic punch on his face. Unlike last time, however, he was ready. As soon as I came within striking distance, a third arm sprouted from his back and grabbed my wrist. He would have broken it if I hadn't reinforced it in the same millisecond that I felt him touch me. As soon as he touched me, I felt a strange force pulling me upwards and back down into the ground again. It didn't come from my arm, so it wasn't his strength that was flipping me over, but the very kinetic energy that I had accumulated thus far in my run. This was clearly bad. I stretched out my chakra to a close and somewhat massive piece of rubble and replaced myself with it. That, fortunately, meant that whatever kinetic energy I had was instantly passed on to the massive slab of concrete and rebar and vice versa. I could almost feel AFO's surprise as he was smacked straight in the face with a piece of rock that weighed a few tons and was traveling at least 200 kilometers per hour. I didn't let him get back to his senses. Fire style. Fire dragon bullet. 3 white hot balls of flame shaped in a dragon's head, each as big as a car, sped towards the pile of rubble where AFO was, blowing it up. Before the dust had even settled, it was blown away by a clearly pissed AFO that had taken cover under some kind of golden shield. It was then that All Might came and delivered another of his famous smashes to that shield. It buckled for a moment, but then it bounced back, throwing All Might into a still-standing building and causing it to collapse. This little distraction allowed me to complete the sequence of hand signs for my next jutsu. Lightning release. Wrath of Indra. I yelled this uncharacteristic shout startled All for One for a bit. From the corner of my eye, I could see that Izuku had activated the 10 heavenly pillar seal, so I didn't really need to worry about them right now. As I began this attack, AFO tried to charge at me, but All Might stopped him. I could sense it, the power gathering in the clouds above. All Might, get away, I called out, heeding my advice. He instantly disengaged and bounded away at a safe distance. AFO tried to follow, but he was stuck. During their clash, All Might was careful to leave on the ground small fuinjutsu tags for me to use. Now, with a single pulse of my chakra, 100 chains leapt out from those tags. The chains of heaven wrapped around him and pierced his limbs, preventing him from fleeing. "What is this?" cried out AFO as he tried ineffectively to escape. "I'm ending this. Now then, this is a momentous occasion. You shall be the first to face this attack, All for One." His eyes widened as I raised my hand that held lightning in its palm towards the heavens and spoke softly. "Kirin." It was quiet for a moment before the heavens answered my call. Lightning flashed in the sky above and came crashing down on AFO. The light it gave off was so blinding that I could swear that night was turned into day. The ground upon which AFO stood had been turned into nothing more than ash and dust. As I looked down into the newly formed crater, I couldn't help but be shocked. Despite the devastation that I inflicted upon him, All for One was still alive. His clothes were tattered and he was bleeding profusely, but I could see that he was still standing. Suddenly his head snapped towards me and I could see the giant grin that was stretching across his face. I did not wait for him to move. Fire style. Majestic flame destroyer. The plume of white-hot flames spread out across the crater and the surrounding area, turning it all to molten lava. Despite this, I could sense something coming from the crater. Suddenly a hand clamped itself on my mouth and I instinctively cut off the jutsu as I was lifted by my chin. I struggled to get out of the vice grip that he had on me, but it was too strong. I turned my Sharingan back to glare at the grinning monster that came out of that inferno. Half his skull was missing its flesh and his eyes were all but cooked. The rest of him was in a similar state, but I could see that whatever regeneration quirk he had was patching him up quite quickly. Seeing his flesh knitting back together was quite disgusting. As I prepared a wind release jutsu to cut off his arm, he slammed me hard onto the ground, an act that forced me to exhale. All Might tried to come to my rescue only to be bitch slapped away. Thankfully he managed to not land in the field of lava I had just created. I had to say, boy, that's quite the impressive quirk you have there. Even now, that I can feel you struggling to breathe, I can sense that power within you. He grinned. It's simply exhilarating. I haven't felt something like this since I tried to take back that quirk I loaned to my brother. I glared at him. There was nothing I could say but tighten my hand's hold over his wrist in a feeble attempt to make him let me go. His hand was over my mouth and nose, and even with chakra, I could feel my strength draining as he suffocated me. Now, stay still and give me your quirk, he yelled as he reached with his other hand for my forehead. Just as he was about to touch me, my shadow clone burst from the ground and attacked him. Well, it didn't really manage to attack as much as startle him, but it was enough for me to get a good gulp of air and let loose a wind-style attack that severed his hand. AFO roared at the wound, but I jumped back and set the severed hand alight with fire chakra. In the very next moment, I unleashed another attack. Wind style. Breath of the wind god that sent AFO flying into a building on the other side of the crater, and thus, he gave me some time to catch my breath. I looked around for All Might. I saw him managing to pick himself up. I wasn't going to lie, he was in a rough shape. His suit was in tatters and he was bleeding profusely. With my eyes, I could see him panting heavily. A cores of one for all in his body getting fainter. He was nearing his limit. He wasn't there yet, but close, very close. All Might, I called. He grunted in reply and swayed a bit. I flash stepped to his side and caught him. Scratch that, he was in really bad shape. I heard an explosion from the place where AFO landed. I looked back at All Might and set him down. All Might, I called to him. He looked at me. I want you to get to safety. Young Madara, I can't asterisk cough asterisk. I watched as All Might devolved in a coughing fit and began to spew blood. From AFO's side of the battlefield, a 10-story building came flying our way. With a simple application of earth release, I raised a wall the size of a skyscraper of pure granite that managed to deflect the thrown building and was summarily sent crashing to the ground. You've done enough, All Might. This is my turn. All Might looked at me strangely at that but nodded. I stood up and took out my second sword, discarding its sheath. I didn't need to look back to sense that All Might had begun moving towards the side of one of the crashed news helicopters that was closest to the barrier that Izuku had put up. Surprisingly enough, the barrier was still mostly intact, with only a few cracks to its name. Izuku has truly outdone himself this time. Now, it's my turn, Izuku cursed as he dodged another plume of blue flame headed towards him. After he managed to get his classmates and Katsuki away from the battlefield, he turned to engage the League. The first to attack him was Toga. Izuku didn't even take her seriously as he countered her knife and used his gunbai to land a vicious attack on her. From the sound of the impact, he definitely cracked a few ribs there. As he was about to finish her off with a seal, Twice came to her rescue as he began to multiply himself. Izuku knew that he was a high-priority target in his brother's war effort against AFO's forces, and yet every time he went to strike a lethal blow to one of the clones he would inevitably have a flashback to the time at the training camp where he ended Muscular's life. It was enough for him to falter in his resolve. He managed to dispel the clone either way, but it seemed that he was incapable of actually killing anyone there. A noble quality for a hero, to be sure, but the longer Izuku fought, the less like a hero he felt. It reminded him of something his brother once told him. To see the world in its full splendor means to be equally awed and disgusted by it. To win a war means to sacrifice your innocence, to have blood on your hands. This battle was the opening salvo in a much greater conflict, and Izuku wasn't sure that at the end of it all he would care enough about the world and the people in it to do as All Might once did and become the pillar upon which the world rests. It seemed that, in the end, his brother was right, as he always is. Izuku Flash stepped away as Shigaraki's hand came through a mist portal of Kurogiri's making. This, however, sent him right into a pack of nomu, which were easily dispatched. It seemed that AFO decided to ditch quality in exchange for quantity when creating his nomu. These could barely manage to survive a blow or two from Izuku before dying, though they were plenty powerful to deal with the rank and file pro heroes on the scene. As he looked around, he came face to face with a terrible scene. The ground was covered in the blood and guts of multiple pro heroes and many more villains and nomu. It was a gruesome sight, and it seemed like most of the heroes that were left were going for the kill, instead of trying to subdue the villains. It was an acceptable compromise. After all, this is war. Further away, one could see the battle taking place between the top 10 and Gigantomachia. It was a sobering sight to Izuku to see the combined power of Endeavor, Mirko, Best Jeanist and Edgeshot be tanked and mashed by the monstrous calamity known as Gigantomachia. It was obvious that the strategy they had employed thus far was not working. As he finished off the last of the nomu in his vicinity and readied himself for another run at Kurogiri, Izuku felt someone land next to him. Looking back, he saw Gran Torino, who despite breathing heavily, was still going strong. Gran Torino called out Izuku. He looked up at the call. "Hey, I see that you're not dead yet, brat," said the old man. Gran Torino, "Sir, I don't think that this is working. We need to regroup and switch targets." Gran nodded. "What's your plan, kid?" Izuku looked back at the battlefield. Now that he was gone for a bit, the league managed to regroup itself. Izuku could see them gathering their injured close to Kurogiri. Togo was out. The blow Izuku dealt her in the beginning was more than enough to put her out of commission. Strangely enough, Twice seemed to stay by her side quite closely. He too looked a bit ragged, and it seemed that he may have somehow hit the original in all the chaos. It wasn't enough to kill or cripple him, but it seemed to have stopped the onslaught of clones, so that was at the very least a plus. Now that the league was out of commission, it was the best time to strike. "I need you to get the other pro heroes to stop fighting Gigantomachia. Tell them to focus on the league and especially Kurogiri. It will take some time for me to prepare my next attack, and after that, I will be useless for anything except close-range combat." "Are you sure that's wise?" asked Gran Torino. "We don't have a choice. A barrage of smaller attacks hasn't made a dent in that thing, and if I'm right, we may just be able to get rid of it in a single attack." Gran Torino was silent for a moment as he considered his possibilities. Izuku allowed this time to rest for a bit. While he wouldn't let it show, supporting such a great barrier, even if it drew mostly from one for all, was taxing. Fortunately, the other heroes made sure that not too many villains had the chance to attack it. Still, some attacks slid through the cracks and have made more than a few dents in the barrier. Not enough to break it, but certainly enough to weaken certain sections of it. The jutsu he was thinking about attempting was, in a sense, a continuation of the Rasengan that his brother taught him. Although even thinking about using the technique brought forth a wellspring of feelings he didn't know how to deal with, Izuku could not deny that this was their only shot at victory. Even with Fuinjutsu aiding him with adding a nature transformation to the Rasengan, and one that he was unfamiliar with at that, it would still extremely difficult and taxing. Still, it was necessary. Izuku knew that reusing Varuna was out of the question, and he could not support enough chains of heaven to bind Gigantomachia, though to be frank, considering how Best Jeanist struggled to bind the giant with his carbon fiber fibers, Izuku wouldn't be surprised to see a similar attack fail. All that was left was to try and bootleg a recreation of the wind style. Rasen Shuriken. It may not work and it might even kill him, but that was the only option that he had. In this place, he was the only one strong enough to deal with Gigantomachia, and he didn't fancy crippling himself to use 100% one for all, as such a blow would even work at taking Gigantomachia down. "Right then, that's enough of a break. I'll get the word out, you focus on what you have to do. Leave the rest to us," said Gran Torino as he blasted off towards the fight. Izuku put the gunbai on his back, locking it in place over the green and slightly tattered haori. Reaching back, he brought out a slightly smaller book, made of metal engraved in golden Fuinjutsu circles. This was a tool Izuku designed for himself if this exact situation happened to occur. Opening it, the book began to levitate as two green multi-stage circles appeared on top of the two sheets of metal. Izuku put his hands through them, and the green lines rearranged to form gauntlets around his hands. With a slight pulse of his chakra, Izuku brought up a complex circle between his hands and began his work. Endeavor grunted as he WG'd. His retaliation was swift though, and the Nomu that dared touch him found himself with the charred remains of a head. As he continued to fight, he couldn't help but notice his colleagues' struggle against the villains. This was supposed to be a rescue mission with All Might and Rikudou dealing with the big bad. Originally he had chaffed at the thought that a 15-year-old was a better match for the big bad than him, the number 2 hero. Endeavor knew who All for One was. Every hero worth his salt knew of him, or at the very least of his legend. Once upon a time, he thought that if push came to shove, he, Endeavor, could defeat All for One. Looking out over the wasteland that was once a vibrant city outside the great barrier that was created by Rikudou's younger brother, Endeavor now understood where he stood. He was a man. He stood at the peak of human potential. Rikudou was something else. The rest of the top 10 pro heroes involved in this operation were all here, and almost all were trying to deal with the horde of villains that came out of the woodwork. And it wasn't only small-time villains coming to the surface here, but monsters like the living calamity known as Gigantomachia. Endeavor and Mirko had both tried to attack the giant only to be repelled. Edgeshot either couldn't manage to find something that he could mess with inside of it, or it healed so fast that it didn't matter what he did. At any rate, he was useless. Best Jeanist was the only one slightly successful in his actions. He managed to restrain the monster, but it was not enough. The other villains were fresh, and they were pouring in like a never-ending stream. In the end, it fell onto Endeavor and the others to defend Jeanist as he restrained what could be the villain's biggest piece. This had the unfortunate repercussion of foisting the responsibility of taking care of the other Nomu and villains onto the other pro-heroes. Just as he was about to attack another foolish villain, Endeavor felt something land next to him. Looking back, he saw an old hero in a yellow cape. "Endeavor, you and the others need to be ready to withdraw," yelled Gran Torino. "What, are you crazy old man?" yelled Mirko as she smacked yet another villain away. "Hey, that's debatable. At any rate, that brat over there said that he had a plan to deal with this thing," said Gran Torino. "You believe that he'll succeed?" grunted out Endeavor. "I believe that it's our best shot at taking this thing down," replied the old man. Endeavor looked at the spot where Izuku Midoriya, brother of Madara, stood completely focused with what looked like a book floating in front of him and green circles of strange symbols around his arms and between his palms. Loath as he is to admit it, Izuku was, like his brother, an incredible warrior. He had single-handedly led the charge against the League of Villains and has maintained a containment field that Endeavor suspected was as much for their own sake as it was for the civilians outside. Suddenly and out of nowhere, a bright light shone from the heavens. The heroes looked on in awe as they witnessed Rikudou call down lightning from the heavens and hit AFO in full. That awe soon turned to horror as even after bathing the area in flames so hot that even Endeavor knew that he had no hope of surviving, All for One still got up and nearly killed Rikudou. Endeavor looked back at his fellow heroes. "When the brag gives the signal, we withdraw," he thundered. There were hesitant nods from the top pro heroes and very enthusiastic nods from the lower level heroes. Just then, a stray attack hit one of the nearby helicopters and sent it careening towards the ground. Before anyone could do anything, All Might appeared and saved them. He deposited them near Izuku and came forth to deliver a devastating punch, blowing back Gigantomachia and most of the villains along with it. Endeavor didn't waste this chance. "Withdraw," he shouted. The remaining heroes all congregated around the place Izuku was at along with the camera crew and news reporter. No matter what happened, this is where they would make their last stand. Win or lose, this was it. After their admittedly daring escape, Katsuki and the rest of the students of Class 1A managed to arrive at a population center. They could still hear and feel the attacks that were launched between combatants. Luckily, they managed to arrive at an area of the city that was relatively protected from the fight that was going on out there. The streets were crowded, and since they were far enough away from the actual fight, police and first responders decided that there was no further need to push the population back. Seeing as there was no police or hero in the vicinity, or at least not one that they could see, the students decided to follow the lead of the other people and sat down. It was then that Kirishima noticed that one of the large screens usually used for ads was showing a live news report from the battle. "Guys, look," Katsuki turned to look at the screen. On it showed something truly unbelievable. Madara was going all out against the villain boss. He could hear the people around him praying for All Might to come to his rescue. They were all disappointed, after the admittedly badass scene of Madara calling down lightning from the sky and spewing fire hot enough to turn the ground to lava, to see All Might be swept aside and disregarded by the villain boss. Madara's subsequent act of freeing himself and jumping to All Might's side as the man coughed what seemed to be blood only disheartened them further. What came next did surprise them though. "Holy shit," came a few cries from the audience. Katsuki agreed. Parring a building being thrown at you by raising another building to repel it with was both an awesome flex and a testament to Madara's power. This being said, no one could have predicted what happened next. As shocked whispers came from the crowd, Katsuki, Kirishima, Shoto, and Iida couldn't be more shocked. "Why is All Might fleeing?" was the thought on everyone's mind. It was an unthinkable action. All Might never fled, it was known. It was this that Katsuki admired about the man ever since he was young. All Might always won, no matter what the odds were, but seeing him like this, fleeing from a villain and injured, it just didn't sit right with him. Suddenly the camera shifted as screams came through. It seemed the helicopter had been hit, and by the terrified screams of the people around them, it was obvious that there was no chance for them, Katsuki idly noted. Then, as sudden as their unplanned fall began, they were picked up midair and landed next to Izuku. "Are you all right?" came a familiar voice. "All Might?" said the reporter. Somehow the cameraman found his sense and brought the camera to bear on All Might. Katsuki nearly recoiled from the sight. He was covered in blood from numerous injuries and was somehow smoking. Though that wasn't the most unsettling thing about him. No, that would be the gaunt form he took. He reminded Katsuki of that sickly stickman that was All Might's secretary. Not so much a secretary, thought Katsuki idly. The camera moved from All Might to Izuku. Katsuki would admit that he had never seen the nerd this way. The way he stood there in absolute confidence on the battlefield with green circles that held what appeared to be runes spinning fast before him. It was a sight that Katsuki doubted that few would forget. As if summoned from thin air, the rest of the heroes congregated around them. "Hey kid, that thing better be ready," called out the hero that Izuku had interned with, Gran Torino. "A few seconds longer and it should be done," replied Izuku. As he said that, the spinning green rings stopped and locked. Complex patterns of green lines formed and Izuku grinned. As he pulled his hands apart, Katsuki could see the formation of something ball-like inside the green circles. "Are you all done now?" came a nasally voice. The camera swiveled to show the League of Villains, and more specifically their leader, Tamura Shigaraki. "You bastard," a pro hero from the mass of them that had survived their melee with the Nomu. In fact, it seemed like the heroes had actually won that engagement but at a terrible cost. Shigaraki laughed. "Oh, that's rich coming from you. Can you not see how happy I am? After all, my master has finally returned to his former glory and your precious symbol of peace is reduced to nothing but a mere shadow of his former self. Look at him, cowering behind a child." At that moment, Katsuki became acutely aware of the people around him and their whispering. They weren't wrong. Footage from other helicopters did show that All Might was standing behind Izuku. "After my master is done with that brat Rikudou, he will end your feeble society and then I will turn you all to dust." The green rings shattered and a ball the size of a baseball of spinning energy with four blade-like protrusion came into existence in Izuku's hand. Looking closely, Katsuki could see that his hair was matted with sweat and he was clearly exhausted. Endeavor, Best Jeanist, Edgeshot, clear the way. The three heroes leapt into action, disabling Kurogiri and the other League members. As soon as most of the League was captured by the other heroes, he was gone in a streak of green light. He climbed up the side of the barrier and when he reached the top he jumped. The camera showed him tossing the shuriken-like sphere with a shout. "Wind style. Rasen's Hurricane." The white orb slammed against the back of the giant villain named Gigantomachia and exploded in a giant sphere of twisting wind that buffeted the camera crew and the other heroes. Screams of pain were heard from the villain, and as Izuku landed the gigantic villain collapsed to the ground unconscious. The crowd cheered for the victory. With the villain gone and the rest of the League in similar states of unconsciousness and restrained, victory was all but assured. However, that was not to be as mere moments later. The great barrier that had protected them so far shattered and All for One landed in front of them. Our fight was exhausting. I can see why it took 8 generations of One for All to do a significant dame to All for One. Even throwing everything I have at this guy, he just gets up. Even a Rasen Shuriken did nothing to him. Well, it did something. It allowed me to inflict more damage, but every time I hit him, he just regenerated. However, I could see that he was beginning to tire. His fighting was getting sloppy at times and the rate at which he was regenerating was steadily decreasing. The problem is that I simply can't keep up. My chakra reserve is dwindling and I'm getting tired. I tried narrowing my attacks, trying to use more taijutsu, but it seemed like All for One had been expecting a close-range fight. My use of ninjutsu at least threw him off for a while. Genjutsu was useless. All it achieved was making him happy and angry that I have so many powers. Heck, he even began monologuing about me stealing his thing. It doesn't matter what I do to him. I need a plan, I can't keep this up. Truth be told, I had a plan. A mad, suicidal plan, but a plan nonetheless. Though I was low on power. The power boost granted by the 8 gates was nothing to scoff at. I believed that even only using the 7th gate might be too much for me and it wasn't a guaranteed killing move. Even so, it was the only move I had left. Suddenly a commotion was heard from inside the barrier. AFO and I both looked and I was both impressed and horrified. Izuku had launched a Rasen Shuriken at Gigantomachia and felled the giant in one strike. It shames me to admit, but I was slow at that moment. As soon as he saw the attack fly, All for One was already speeding towards the barrier. He broke through in a single punch. By the time I managed to arrive, he had managed to free the League and throw off the top 10 heroes that tried to capture them, severely wounding Best Jeanist in the process. I landed in front of the heroes. Rikudou, young Madara, Ni-san. I looked back at the people who shouted and saw their horrified looks. And why wouldn't they be? My armor was broken. The armor that had designed to help me beat All for One only helped to soften his blows. I was cut, scaped and bruised. Blood was flowing out of me along with the silvery liquid of the liquid crystal inner layer. The mixing of the two substances gave the blood I spilled somewhat of an ethereal quality. The remaining tatters of my red over armor fabric were dangling in the wind, held only by a few supports. It was utterly destroyed. Looking back, I saw All for One ensuring the League's escape, as well as sending Gigantomachia away with his own warp quirk. I stood at the ready. This would be my one final effort. Once he was done, He turned to us with a big smile on his face and began to clap. "Bravo, bravo! You truly have surpassed my every expectation, Rikudou. Not since All Might have I had the opportunity to fight such a powerful opponent." He was buying time, I know this. Most of his clothes had already been shredded by our confrontation, and all he had on him right now were the tattered remains of a once full-sleeved shirt and pants. With my Sharingan, I could see many small cuts on his person that were only now beginning to heal. Interesting, so his healing ability can be focused. That was good to know, but could it repair damaged vital organs, like the Nomu could? You know, Rikudou. Even as you stand here, half defeated, I can't help but notice all the heroes that are cowering behind you. Why even the once mighty All Might has taken to hiding behind the backs of children. When I came here to kill you, I admit that I wanted you to suffer. After all, you are All Might's heir. What a shame that you aren't his successor, that would have made this victory even sweeter. But no matter, your brother clearly isn't at your level, so it should be quite easy to kill him and end his line of heroes. Oh, this was bad. If All for One leaked the secret of One for All, there will be chaos. Really now, you're deduced to mocking a child. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, quipped back All Might as he came forward, power beginning to fill his body once more, but it was just an ember, a pittance of the once vast inferno that resided inside of him. Ah, All Might, my most hated nemesis. How quaint that you are here. Are you seeking to recreate your master's death at my hands? Display yourself before me to save your precious heir and successor, as Shimura Nana did before you? Shut your goddamned mouth. Don't you dare speak my master's name from your filthy mouth. All for One laughed. You know, All Might, out of all those who have held One for All, you are certainly the one I've hated most. I may have killed your master, but you destroyed my life's work. Can you even see the ground from the mountain of my associates that you have crushed under your fists? Still, it matters not. Before I kill you, I'm going to crush you, starting with that false image you put up. As he said this, All for One's hand started to swell with power. Doge! I shouted there was no way for me to tank this, or anyone for that matter. Izuku jumped into action and removed the camera crew while the rest of the top 10 heroes dispersed. What we all failed to notice was the two people hobbling out of a collapsed building behind us. All Might did not fail to notice them. All Might stood his ground as All for One took his shot. I watched in horror as the power he had managed to scrounge up was used all at once to block and redirect the wave of high-pressure air away from the building behind his back, leaving All Might with nothing but the withered old husk of his usual self. See this, people of Japan. This is your idol, your hero. This withered wreck is the so-called symbol of peace. It was then that I noticed the camera crew and Izuku standing in front of them with his gunbai at the ready to deflect another shot. A slight cough came from All Might as he looked at his enemy. Even if you strip away my flesh, my heart will never stop being that of a hero. I am the symbol of peace, that you. All for One shrugged and looked on slightly exasperated. I should have known that it would not be this easy. All right, fine, I give up. Oh, I should mention, Shigaraki Tamura, my successor, is actually Shimura Nana's grandson. There was silence on the field. I looked at All Might and saw realization dawning on his face and then, horror. Izuku was much the same. That's not true, he can't be, All Might whispered. Come now, do you really believe that? This is something that I would totally do. Do you want to know more? I actually found him under a bridge after he had activated his quirk. The poor thing was starving and yet not a single hero came to his aid. I should find it ironic that I was the only one who rescued poor boy, don't you agree? All Might fell to his knees and All for One laughed. Now then that the aid is broken, what say we should do? Ninth, said All for One as he turned to Izuku. Or should I call you by your hero name? That you don't have one, do you? Well, no matter. How about I give you one? What do you say, One for All? This was it. The secret was out. Or some of it at least. This is bad. This is very bad. If I let this continue it will end in disaster. All for One is still too powerful and without dust release I don't think that I could one-shot him. Even so, there is one thing that I could try. It's risky, but it's my only choice. Hopefully, Izuku can buy me some time. What do you want All for One? Came Izuku's voice, holding strong. What do I want? Oh, you poor boy, I want what I've always wanted, but we're not here to discuss that. You know what, I'll make you an offer. Give me One for All and I'll let you and your family live. I'll even let All Might live, he's no threat to me in this state, said All for One. And if I refuse, countered Izuku as he clutched his gunbai harder. All for One's eyes shone with malicious intent. I think you already know the answer to that. Then you know my answer All for One, replied Izuku as green sparks began running over his suit. So be it. At that moment, I erupted. The chakra that I had been gathering released at once in one single direct and piercing attack concentrated around my hand and aimed at All for One's head. A single Chidori that would make or break this fight. Being so close, there was no way I could miss. Cree 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 splat drip cree drip cree. Drip. Madara? A weak and surprised voice called out. Mother, time stood still at that moment. I could see it all unfold before my very eyes. My perception was such that even the smallest detail was not left unnoted. I think that this is the first time that I've ever hated my existence here. When I leapt to kill All For One, I had done so with nigh absolute confidence of my success. The path had been clear. All For One was busy taunting Izuku and the distance between us was short. It should have been over in a flash. It wasn't. As I reached out with my lightning-covered hand, Sharingan blazing and searching for any movement that might denote even the slightest of retribution, it happened. It happened so fast that I couldn't even react properly. One moment I was staring down All For One, my hand stretching out and mere inches from plunging into his skull and frying his brain, and the next I was plunging my lightning-covered hand through my mother's chest. For a few moments, I was shocked. I thought that it was an illusion, a figment of All For One's perverted imagination forced onto me for his twisted pleasure. Then I felt the warmth. A familiar warmth. Viscous, pulsating warmth of the remains of a heart trying to pump blood uselessly clenching around my forearm. Then I heard her voice, Madara. I looked at her, the woman that brought me and my brother into this world. She is a kind and gentle soul that even put up with my distancing from her and never stopped loving me. She loved me and my brother so much and I was killing her. My eyes widened as I heard my brother scream in the distance. The crackling of lightning in my hand died down and I pulled it back. It was now coated in crimson blood and making a sound so retching that it will haunt my nightmare for decades to come. No, please, this can't happen, please, I begged quietly. Without my hand supporting her, my mother began to fall. I caught her and sank to my knees. She was dead. It mattered not that I was mere feet from a maniacally laughing All For One. She was dead. It mattered not that the whole world could see us. She was dead, and the last thing I ever said to her was to get out or I would take her only remaining son away. I didn't even get to make amends. What a horrible son I must be. Grief overtook me and I screamed. I wailed my pain and grief as I held my dead mother in my arms. Dead my hand my brother, orphaned by my hand the enemy. No, I refuse. At that moment the frigid grief that held me vanished and in its place a terrible boiling hatred took root in my soul. I screamed again, this time not out of grief, but of pain, of anger, and rage so hot and pure that I could have used it to scorch the earth. And I did. My eyes felt like they were on fire, like someone took them out with hot pincers and poured molten metal in my eye sockets. I did not shy away from this pain. I embraced it. This was the method of my revenge. A power etched into my blood and brought forth by the loss of a loved one so dear that one would set the world alight to protect them, a loved one that you failed to protect. This was not about justice. This was vengeance. I swear, I will not rest until all that All For One is and ever was is erased from history itself, and if I have to unmake the world to do that, then so be it. For now, though I shall settle for burning his flesh away, I will burn down his legacy later. I wiped my head to look at All For One, the demon that took my family from me, the evil that made me commit one of the most heinous acts imaginable. I could sense the power coursing through the molten pits that were now my eyes as the three-tomo pattern of the Sharingan spun and as it churned up the blood-red depths of my iris and a new pattern emerged. 6 spokes, all shaped like a teardrop converging around my pupil and at their head, their outermost edge, a single dot of red was to be seen. O son, hear and obey. Amaterasu. Izuku's entire life shattered at that moment as he saw the Chidori in his brother's hand pierce their mother's heart. He screamed and tried to rush forward, but he was tackled to the ground by Gran Torino. He continued to trash in the old man's hold, but it was useless. He would not let go, no matter how much Izuku screamed and cursed at him to do so. The other heroes watched in shock and horror as Madara let loose an unholy scream of pain and grief. A scream that had All For One laughing so hard that he threw his head back. Wonderful, oh how wonderful, I can't believe that you fell for it, oh, can this day get any better? I already have my enemies on their knees. What more can I desire? Said All For One as his laughter subsided into chuckles. Well, there is quite a lot that I desire, but for now how about I declare myself Emperor of Japan? It is a fitting end, no? What say you, people of Japan? Asked All For One as he pointed a finger to the shocked and horrified camera crew. Just then, another scream, this time of rage, tore itself from Madara's throat. All For One turned to deal with the eldest Midoriya when his head snapped up and stared down All For One with hateful crimson eyes. Changed eyes, changed heart. Izuku felt his heart drop. He knew what was happening. His brother had activated the one thing that he swore he would not seek. Power for power's sake. Power for retribution, for vengeance, for destruction. Madara Midoriya has awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, and may the gods have mercy for those upon which those eyes' sight falls, for he will have none. Amaterasu. Izuku felt as well as heard the calling of the heavenly illumination flames, and he saw the result. As blood dripped from Madara's left eye socket, the new pattern of the Mangekyo Sharingan spun and black flames erupted on All For One. The King of Evil screamed in pain as he began ripping pieces of his flesh from his bones in an attempt to stave off the destructive flames. As if seeing no other option, AFO opened his mouth wide and shed his skin. What emerged was a grotesque version of the man, pink and without hair, missing limbs and other parts of his flesh. He could hardly be called a man, such was the wretchedness of his state. It was as if he had expelled his soul from his domed corpse. With a scream of rage, he threw an attack at Madara. Izuku despaired. His brother was not moving, and he could not. He resumed his struggle against the heroes that were, in hindsight, rightfully trying to stop him from getting himself recklessly killed even harder. He had lost his mother today, he will not lose his brother too. In the end, it seemed like he needn't worry. As the attack approached, a golden aura surrounded his brother, parrying the attack. AFO looked befuddled as he tried to regain some semblance of his former body and strength back. The golden aura around Madara shifted, as a ribcage formed from it, and then a skull and two skeletal arms, all golden. The skull had a crown of horns atop its head, and as it stabilized it roared along with Madara. Susanoo! All stood in awe at the sight. A sight that will be forever burned into the hearts and minds of those watching as the time a new god had come into his full might upon the battlefield. The giant chakra construct swung its arm and a wave of pressurized air shot out, blowing the FO away. Madara rose from where he had knelt beside his mother's now lifeless body and began to slowly stagger towards All For One as he panted heavily, both his eyes bleeding profusely. Were this a fair fight, Madara would have won, there was little doubt about it. But it was not, and Madara was tired. Izuku knew this. He remembered when they were little and used to cuddle together at night that his brother would sometimes tell him stories of great men that were known to be able to call upon the gods to act as their shield and sword. While the description slightly differed, Izuku knew that this was what he was talking about. This was the ultimate shield and sword, the very thing upon which Varuna was based. He with the ability to help by all means, Susanoo. But Izuku also saw how incredibly taxing such a thing was for his brother, and he knew if Madara fought All For One as he is now, he would lose, not because he would be defeated, but because All For One will flee. As he watched the screen, Katsuki was left horrified. Many around him shared the same sentiment, and even the news commentators were silent. How could they not be, after all? They had just witnessed the tragic ending of what seemed to be Rikudou's last desperate attack. Next to him, Katsuki was aware of Yaoyorozu and Kirishima barfing, while Iida stood still, shocked and horrified. What came next was sure to scar people for life. Even Katsuki's heart twisted at the sound of Madara's tragic wail, and disgust filled his mouth at the sound of All For One's laughter. He wanted to puke, but his eyes were riveted to the screen in a nearly perverse manner. He watched as Izuku, known as One For All, was wrestled to the ground by one of the other heroes to stop him from recklessly charging the evil megalomaniac that had just forced his brother to kill his own mother. And then he watched as Madara rose, soul and eyes full of hatred, and all of it directed at one person. He watched as he bathed the king of evil in black hell flame. It was not glorious, it was not funny or commendable. This was not the world of heroes that he had been raised to believe in. This was a twisted mockery of that world. As more and more people began to despair, even as Madara, clad in his golden avatar, staggered forward to once again do feudal battle with the king of evil, a single voice broke the silence. This is not how it will end. Do not despair, for I am here. All Might felt like a failure. He had failed his master, and now he was failing his heir and successor. He was failing the world. He was supposed to be the one to fight All For One, not Madara. Not for the first time, All Might had wondered how the world would have been without Madara. Would he and the world at large have survived this day? Would they have seen the dawn of a new day as free people or as the subjects of All For One? As he watched on now, All Might couldn't but despair. Who was there to say, I am here? Who was there for the people to rely on? Not Madara, not now, while mad with grief and rage and with hatred rolled off him in droves. Even as he staggered towards his wounded foe clad in that golden avatar of his, All Might could see that all that was holding him upright was pure strength of will and an undying hatred for All For One. All Might would be remiss to not compare this to the hatred he held for the symbol of evil after he killed his mother. And at the same time, young Izuku was too young, far too young in both body and spirit to be asked to hold the weight of the entire world on his shoulders as All Might once did. All Might took a look to his side where Grand Torino and Best Jeanist were both restraining Izuku, who had tears in his eyes as he struggled ever harder to escape. What he would do afterward, All Might had no idea. He could flee or fight, the result was all the same. All Might was gone, and all that remained was Yagi Toshinori, a pitiful, quirkless old man. Remember Toshinori. Whenever you feel you can't go on, remember your origin. Yagi almost gasped. That was his master's voice. This was the end, wasn't it? Yagi looked around, and all he was were the frightened expressions of the people around him, and all of a sudden he was 15 again, and the world was shrouded in darkness. No, this is not the way I'll go. My origin, I must remember. There must be something that can turn the tide of this battle, something to make sure that All For One dies for good. And it was then that a memory arose in All Might's mind. Flashback, around the time of the practical exams. All Might had rarely returned to his agency recently. Now that he had taken to teaching full time, he simply had no time to dedicate to it. Still, he thought that he should at least pay a visit to see young Madara and how he was doing. As he walked through the doorway, he couldn't but notice a slew of fresh faces around. It seemed that young Madara had made some changes. Not that he was disapproving, but it seemed odd. As he identified himself at the security desk, he was almost instantly ushered to a private elevator. That was certainly odd. His smaller form certainly didn't get this kind of attention, even from his own agency back when he still led it. He arrived quite quickly to the top floor and was led into a grand room. It was quite Spartan, with but a desk and a single wall of glass windows to let sunlight in. There were also a couple of chairs. The most odd was the fact that Madara was doing paperwork at the office. The boy looked up and blinked, as if not believing what he was seeing. "All Might, did you need something?" "Not particularly, no, I mostly came by to see how you were doing. After all, I did sort of drop this all on you quite suddenly." Madara glared at him at that. All Might replied with a sheepish smile. "As you can see, I am quite busy," he replied scathingly. All Might flinched at that. He remembered hearing that Madara had just returned from successfully busting a large den of organized crime and got leads and evidence on many of its higher-ups. That was bound to cause some paperwork. "Right, well, I'll only be a little. Actually, I wanted to ask you something about what you have written in your findings about me, specifically about the thing that you call the 8 gates. Madara looked at All Might for a while before motioning for him to sit down as Fuinjutsu circles activated and barriers were raised. "What about it? Well, I wonder why you called them frail." Madara gained a look of recognition. Well, it's as I said. They're frail. Being subjected to the stress of having the full power of one for all coursing through them almost constantly for the past 40 years has simply worn them down. You have to remember that the gates are there to regulate the flow of chakra through the body. The fact that you pushed one for all through them along with normal chakra has destabilized them. It's as simple as that, he explained. "Then, will the same happen to young Izuku?" asked All Might concerned. Madara laughed and shook his head. "This won't happen to us. This happened to you because you pushed and trained with one for all before you develop even a shred of your own chakra, and thus you pushed the gates to take the full brunt of one for all's nature energy's corrosive effect. What should have normally been dampened by a layer of chakra came into direct contact with the gates and began eroding them. Why do you think I didn't let Izuku use OFA as soon as he received it? Anyways, why do you ask? If you were in any danger I would have told you about it the moment I discovered it? Well, it's more of an old man's curiosity this, but I have heard young Izuku say something about the 8-gate formation. When I tried to ask him what it was he clammed up and told me to talk to you." Madara's face became grim, and All Might couldn't help but feel a shiver go down his spine at that look. "He was right to tell you to come to me. Needless to say that you can't tell this to anyone, but it goes like this. The 8 gates formation is a forbidden technique of the highest order. I already explained this to the faculty at UA. But in essence, you can open the gates inside your body for a massive power boost. The downside is that, like with one for all, an unprepared body will be shattered by its use. Heck, even for a prepared one it will be hell. The gates exist because the human body simply can't take the full force of chakra without shattering. You must understand that even under the direst of conditions, I would hesitate to use this technique. Messing up would mean certain death." Suddenly a light bulb appeared in All Might's head. "Does that mean that I can—" "No," said Madara resolutely, "for you it will be suicide. The shock on your body that opening even a single gate will cause may very well lead to a chain reaction that will break open all the gates, even the gate of death. I need not tell you that nothing can save you from." All Might nodded and, after thanking him for his time, he left to ponder what he had learned. Flashback end. As he remembered, All Might couldn't but look at the battlefield. Was this the time to use it? All for One was running as more and more of the crater where a city once stood was now being ringed with black flames. Even so, he couldn't help but notice that Rikudou's avatar was beginning to look somewhat more ghostly, and it no longer had a head and one arm. It was clear that he was at the end of his line. He had reached his limit, and without using the gates himself, he would lose. Even if AFO didn't kill him, they couldn't allow him to escape. And so, All Might dug deep for that one last remaining ember of one for all and sent it smashing with all his might into the place where he knew the first gate was located. All Might gasped in pain as he felt the gate not open, but shatter, and power unlike anything he has had or felt before was now coursing through him and returning him to his original form as a cloak of crimson energy. His own blood that was currently evaporating formed around him. He could feel young Izuku's eyes on him and the sheer horror that was exuding from him. "Do not fear, for I am here." With that, All Might leapt into battle. Even if it will be his last, All Might was determined to go out as a hero. Still, he couldn't but think back to his successor and how disturbingly tragic and similar this was to his own master's death. "I have taught you all I can, young Izuku, and I have become your brother's pupil in my own right. Please forgive this selfish action of mine, but I still have one more person to save tonight." "All Might!" screamed Izuku in horror. He knew what the red vapor signified. He knew what his mentor, the closest thing to a father he and Madara have ever had just done. all for the sake of finally ending that monster that forced his elder brother to awaken those cursed eyes. All Might was gone in a flash, and with a single punch, he broke through Madara's Susanoo, or what was left of it, and grabbed him. He brought Madara back and laid him on the ground. Izuku lost it and unleashed Black Whip, tearing through Best Jeanist's fibers and all but teleporting to his brother's side. "Ni-san," called out Izuku. Madara gave him a soft and pitiful smile in return, looking up at him with his crimson Mangekyo eyes that bore so much pain in them. Izuku turned his gaze to All Might only to find him gone. He was flying through the air, kicking it to go even faster as All for One attempted to fly away. The battle with his brother had left him scarred and missing all his limbs. The only reason why his guts were still intact, despite the massive hole rippled into his abdomen, was that he was keeping them that way through some clever use of a telekinesis quirk. In the end, Madara had left him even more damaged than his previous fight with All Might ever did. Izuku attempted to rise and do something to support All Might when Madara grabbed his hand. "Don't," he rasped. "What? Why?" demanded Izuku. Madara said nothing as he tried to stand. Izuku helped him, but it was clear that Rikudou had nothing left to give. Izuku would bet his life that he was using the last sheds of his chakra to power his eyes, possibly to create a last-ditch Susanoo to protect him and those around him. Madara pointed his hand at the battle unfolding above and looked at the camera. "Look. Watch and burn this sight into your hearts and minds. Look and bear witness as the greatest of all the villains falls at the hand of the greatest of all the heroes." "Ni-san," began Izuku. This was painful even for him. Did his brother even know what he was asking the regular people of Japan? "No, don't you dare look away. Don't you dare disrespect All Might's final act. Watch and bear witness. This is the end of an era. Watch and bear witness as your hero fights for you," roared Madara. Even weak as he looked right now, none could deny his words. Even the rest of the top 10 heroes stood and bore witness, transfixed upon the battle in the sky. That night, all across Japan people stopped what they were doing and watched and cheered as one heart and one voice for their greatest hero to triumph. For evil to fall and good to prosper. They all stood and watched as All Might, clad in crimson, saved them all. As All for One tried to escape, All Might would send blows of pressurized air of such force that it parted the clouds and broke the ground. All for One was at his wit's end, desperate for anything he could do to survive, but against this level of power, there was nothing he could do. Eventually, All Might managed to land a blow on his head, nearly crushing his skull, that sent him rocketing to the ground. All Might followed suit as he announced his last attack. The sum of all that he and 7 others had cultivated added to a power learned from one's own pupils. United States of Smash. Time and space bent against his fist as a crimson lance formed behind him. The ground below shattered with such force that the resulting quake caused large-scale devastation through Japan. The resulting updraft forced entire buildings to be swept up. It was of such force that Izuku had to raise a shield to protect himself and the people around him from it, though he never looked away from All Might's last stand. But it mattered not. The fist of justice had reached its mark. As the smoke cleared, it was clear for all to see, All Might standing in that crater. The whole of Japan was silent for a moment, and then as the first ray of dawn bathed the area in sunlight, All Might rose one fist in the air. Victory! The crowds all around Japan broke in tears, sobs, and cries of joy. Each end everyone was chanting All Might's name. All except 2. For Izuku and Madara knew what this truly meant. As the sun rose enough, it began to form around All Might a halo of light. It was then that Madara finally allowed his Sharingan to tune off and he let out a sob. Izuku did much the same as both brothers sunk to their knees and cried. Those around them were confused. They could not sense what they did. They could not sense as All Might's chakra finally flickered out. As a slight breeze picked up, slight particles of dust began to flow upwards and away from All Might, until finally a sufficient gust of wind blew and All Might's chart remains dissolved into naught but ash and dust, all blown in the wind. The greatest hero had given his all and all that remained were the 2 boys that stand as his legacy. The ray of light that once shone on All Might now shone of Madara and Izuku, but they did not care. The 2 young would-be pillars remained in that same spot and cried. They mourned the death of a mother and the final act of love from a father, a mentor, and a savior. Dawn had come, and with it had brought both terrible pain and newfound hope. For now was the time for mourning, for reconciliation. After all, this was but the end of one thing and the beginning of another, and there was still much to be done, but that could wait, for now. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled as rain continued to pour over the half-destroyed city. Thousands of rescue heroes and first responders swarmed over what was left of Kamino Ward. Most often than not, all they managed to pull from the rubble were the managed corpses of the people which used to live there. The rescue operation wasn't made easier by the sheer amount of damage that befell the city. Deep gorges had been carved, some of which had broken the gas and water pipelines that kept the city fed. Others were filled with lava, or even worse, they became pools where sewer water pooled, filling the surrounding area with an unbearable stench. Amidst all of that, the black flames kept on burning, silent reminders of the might of those that had clashed here not a few hours prior. What had been a clear and mournful dawn had quickly turned into a tragic day. On the outskirts of the city, crowds of onlookers came against the police barricades. Some were fathers looking for their children, some were mothers clutching their remaining family, some were weary relatives awaiting anxiously for news of their kin's survival. Such devastation was rare in the modern world. Even most natural disasters were swiftly dealt with by the local heroes. To see an entire city destroyed and thousands of people dead and displaced was horrifying enough. But to know that all this was the aftermath of a battle between two people struck a chord within most citizens. Quirks were not supposed to be this powerful. Individual people were not supposed to be this powerful, and yet here was undeniable proof that such monsters did, in fact, exist. Faced with this revelation, murmurs began to spread as society itself slowly began its death spiral to what will eventually become known as the Second Age of Darkness. Inside a building in Tokyo, Japan's heads of government, police force, military and public hero safety commission gathered. They stood there quietly around a U-shaped table as they listened to the damage report of what the media was now referring to as the battle at Kamino. It was known by other names as well. All Might's final stand, the duel for Japan, the clash of gods and monsters, were all apt descriptions. Unfortunately, they all presented a whitewashed version of the events that transpired there, and were far from the sheer scale that this event's aftermath would entail. As soon as he finished the presentation, the unfortunate employee that was forced into being the bearer of bad news fled the room as quickly as possible. They remained in silence for a few moments. "Is there any further intel that must be discussed?" asked the Prime Minister. "Nothing much. The Nomu we managed to capture were all useless and the other villains have all had their brains fried," reported a member of the police commissioner's team. "So we're at a loss?" "I wouldn't say so. We did manage to take out their boss and most of their forces." "Don't be stupid," interrupted the police commissioner in a bored tone, but one that still held steel. "We just lost All Might, the symbol of peace, and an entire city got destroyed. Or did you not hear what was just said?" The unfortunate minister that happened to voice said opinion cringed back and shrunk in his seat. The commissioner continued. "We might have captured most of the League's assets, but the League itself is still loose. Shigaraki has shown himself to be dangerous and has set a dangerous precedent. He has shown the underworld that you can raise hell with only a few thugs. That's all well and good, but we still need to address the elephant in the room. Or was I the only one who noticed that a 15-year-old boy managed to go toe-to-toe with the literal boogeyman of Japan and win?" said the army general. This gave way to a series of hushed whispers in the room. "Enough, Madam President, I would like to hear your thoughts on the matter," said the Prime Minister. The Hero Commission President gathered herself as she answered. "Madara Midoriya is an outlier. From what we managed to gather, he was not interested in being a hero initially. In fact, it was his younger brother, Izuku Midoriya, who wished to be a hero. I find that hard to believe, Madam President. Do you mean to tell me that the one who is arguably the strongest person on Earth now that All Might is gone, did not wish to be a hero initially?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. He had a promising career as a child genius and some of the world's top university had already scouted him. By the time he was 10 he had a standing invitation to I Island. Do not make the mistake of thinking him politically inept, gentlemen. He managed to hide his powers from us for the better part of 11 years and once he was in UA, there was nothing that we could do to bring him under us," said the Hero Commission President. "This being said, are you confident in his loyalty to us? How do we know that he won't just defect the moment we fall on rough times or a better opportunity presents itself abroad? We all know that it was only by God's graces that we did not lose All Might to the Americans. The US is already powerful enough, we don't need to strengthen them further," said the general. "I wouldn't worry about that. We can keep the population pacified for the most part. All Might's already gone and did the heavy lifting for us and made himself a martyr. Now we just need to be careful and not let Shigaraki sink his teeth in the population even further," said the police commissioner. "You are making it sound so simple, when it all but simple. All of you forget that two 15-year-olds went and fought on a battlefield, which I might add, is illegal. Even if you make them up to be the successors of All Might himself, it won't change the fact that they're minors," said the HPSC president. "I don't think that you noticed, but All For One himself called them All Might's heir and successor, and that's without taking into account what he implied when he gave Izuku Midoriya the hero name One For All," said the general. Silence fell over the gathering as they all processed what was said. They knew how media worked. In at most 24 hours, someone would piece it together and share it on social media. The question of why Izuku Midoriya was named One For All was less important. What was important was the fact that it was connected to All For One and Izuku Midoriya had it, seemingly receiving it from All Might himself, going by how he called them 8th and 9th respectively. "We need to find out what One For All is," said the Prime Minister. "Oh, please, even you can't be this stupid," interrupted the general, which made the Prime Minister glare at him. "Really? Well, do enlighten us then. One For All is clearly a weapon, and seeing that I didn't see any device around those two, we can safely assume that it is, in fact, a quirk, replied the general smugly. The room fell into silence. A quirk? Asked the Hero Commission president incuriously. It makes sense, in a way, began the police commissioner, one for all and all for one. They are brother quirks, or at least close enough. So you're saying that we have another quirk out there that can what? Pass itself on to another? Asked the prime minister incuriously. That's exactly what I'm saying, and let's not forget that it is Izuku Midoriya that has this power. He was chosen by All Might himself, and his brother managed to go toe-to-toe with the full power of All for One without this one for all power to aid him, said the general. Well then, we can't let this power lie in the hands of a child. All Might should have handed it over to us, crowed up one of the ministers surrounding the prime minister. The general laughed. The police commissioner joined in with a small smile while the president of the Hero Commission stayed silent on the matter, though she did shake her head. Are you really that stupid? How can you even think of saying that, you moron? Yelled the general as he regained himself from his laughing fit. The minister flinched at the harsh words, and besides, what if he doesn't hand over that power to us? What then, huh? Do you have does anyone? We can already infer that All for One is unable to steal this power. Otherwise it wouldn't have lived this long, and let's not forget that Izuku Midoriya is the only thing keeping his brother in check for now. What do you think he'll do when he finds out that you've accosted his little brother and tried to steal that which All Might himself has given them? What then? There was silence in the room as the general leaned back in his chair, sufficiently satisfied now that the upstart minister was put back in his place. The others in the room had similar thoughts on the matter. After all, having a power such as One for All in the hands of children was certainly dangerous, but then again, that very same line of people that possessed One for All through the ages had managed to defeat All for One once already. So no, for now this line of discussion would be benched. There were other matters of greater importance to deal with than who gets control over One for All. The power was safe enough where it was. For Izuku the past 24 hours had been a blur. Ever since All Might had given his life to defeat All for One, all Izuku could feel was numbness. That and sorrow. Looking up from his hands as he sat in the only chair in the private hospital room, Izuku gazed at the steady rising and falling of his brother's chest. The only indication that he was alive. Izuku had refused to leave the room, nearly attacking the stupidly insistent nurse that thought to tell him what to do. Fortunately, cooler heads prevailed and one of the co-workers of the nurse grabbed her hand and pulled her away, all the while giving him a frightened look. As soon as he retreated into the room the hospital staff stuffed his brother into, Izuku allowed himself to relax and attempt to rein in the chakra that was leaking off him. He knew that it was making people uncomfortable to be in his presence, but he just didn't care. He didn't want people to see him like this. Not now, not when the only thing that was keeping his face dry was that single thought that he must endure. For All Might, for his brother, for everyone who lost a loved one as in that fight, for his mother. Against his efforts, a single tear slipped down his cheek. It was tainted red, as if to signify the taint he now carried. He knew better, though. Ever since All Might had disintegrated into the wind, Izuku felt an ever-present burning sensation in the back of his eyes. Izuku's grip on the chair's armrest tightened dangerously and the plastic creaked in his hand, a testament to his strength. Whatever it was, One for All itself was fighting against it. Izuku was not willing to fight One for All to discover what it was, but he had an idea. Suddenly the door opened and inside walked Gran Torino, Night-Eye and Tsukauchi. Izuku didn't even look up to greet them. Midoriya, began Tsukauchi. He soon fell silent. After all, what was there left to say? Is this what you saw in your vision? Asked Izuku as he turned and looked straight into Night-Eye's eyes. Night-Eye shook his head. He then did something completely unexpected and fell to his knees before Izuku, pressing his forehead to the ground in utmost reverence. Please forgive me, he said in a tone thick with emotion and fresh tears. I once thought that the future couldn't be changed, that whatever prophecies I give and whatever I see will forever come to pass. What I saw back then was All Might's death at the hands of an unspeakable evil. A death so gruesome that it left scars on the minds of those who witnessed its aftermath. I saw All Might die as a broken man, not as a symbol. I was wrong to doubt you, and I was wrong to withdraw my support from his side. Please, I seek atonement. Let me help you as I failed to help All Might. Izuku looked on at the man prostrate before him. He could be petty. He could reject the man and let him suffer, but he wouldn't. After all, Izuku Midoriya was a hero, and what kind of a hero would he be if he turned down a request for aid? Izuku rose from his chair, the slightly tattered green haori swaying around him as he approached Night-Eye. The man dared to look up and one could see his shining eyes full of tears. Izuku crouched in front of him and grabbed his hand. All Might had already forgiven you and I have nothing to forgive. But nothing, cut him off Izuku. You did what you thought was best, and that's all I can ever ask of you. That's all anyone can ask of you. If you are willing, I will gladly accept your help. UA soon returned in session, though this time it was brevet of students. Only the teachers were here and almost all of them were on high alert. For Nezu, this was to be expected. The school had just failed its sacred task. It allowed one of its students to be kidnapped and the entire heroic first year had been attacked. It would have been a disaster of epic proportions for any other institution, but fortunately UA was not just any institution. "Sir, what are you doing?" asked a somewhat annoyed Aizawa. "Nothing much, though I did notice that Madara tends to do this when he is deep in thought," said Nezu, not yet turning from where he was watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows the grounds of UA where construction was happening in full. Aizawa didn't dare ask how he found our Madara's secret proclivities for supervillain behavior. "We need to discuss the dorm system," said Aizawa. "You mean we need to discuss young Izuku's placement in this system?" Aizawa didn't speak, but his silence was telling, so Nezu decided to play along. He from the widow and looked Aizawa in the eye. "He needs to be with others his own age," said Aizawa. "He shall be with them," agreed Nezu, as something more than a glorified watchdog. "The kid hasn't formed true bonds with his classmates since the year began. They're simply too far apart in terms of skills," said Aizawa. "So what do you propose, that I move him up a year or two?" asked Nezu. Aizawa mentally grimaced. He knew that Izuku was already good enough that the top student of the third years, Mirio Tagata, posed no threat to him, but he hoped that by introducing his number one overpowered problem child to other strong people, that he would make deeper friendships than what he had in his own class. "To be honest, I don't see any problems with his current position as a member of Class 1A, said Nezu. "You wouldn't, but the others don't see Izuku Midoriya as a peer. He's so far above them that it's not even funny, and it's not like the kid will have any desire to indulge in his more childish side from now on. I worry that it will negatively impact his growth not only as a hero, but as a person as well," said Aizawa. Nezu sipped his tea. He was well aware of the distance between the ninth and his class. Despite what Aizawa said, he knew how loneliness can affect a person, but he was also aware of the growing frustration Izuku faced with his classmates. So, no, forcing them together would be pretty bad, especially now. "I can see your point, but I will still insist to allow Izuku Midoriya the freedom to come and go from the premise as he pleases." Aizawa looked shocked and angry at the declaration. "May I ask why are you playing favorites?" he asked through gritted teeth. "Certainly," replied Nezu with a smile. "Right now, we can't cage Izuku, not after he lost his mother and All Might. Furthermore, his brother is in a coma. Trying to strong-arm him into anything right now pointless, if not downright idiotic. Like it or not, Aizawa, those two boys hold the weight of All Might's legacy on their shoulders. They need to be seen, not hidden away behind a wall. That, and I'm certain that Izuku Midoriya will push for an early graduation, something that the HPSC will undoubtedly support." Aizawa was silent for a moment. He then turned around and stormed out of his office. Nezu sighed. One problem at a time. For the rest of the students in Class 1A, returning to school was not the joyful reunion they had expected. After the battle at Kamino, they all had time to think, and despite their parents' reluctance, they convinced TTURN to UA and their stay in the dorm rooms. However, whatever excitement they had first felt when they reunited soon turned sour as they couldn't help but notice a hole in their ranks. Now, instead of the 20 they had once been, now they were only 18. Aizawa looked on at the mass of students arrayed before him. He couldn't deny that their feelings were understandable. "Good, now that we're all here." Kaya flinched from some of the class. "We have to go over the rules of this dorm. However, first we must address something else." Todoroki, Yaoyorozu, Kirishima and Iida stepped forward. Like doomed convicts, the four stepped forward with their heads bowed and awaiting their sentence. "Now, normally for what you have done, I would have expelled you, but given the state of the world right now, I can't afford to do that. Therefore you will not be permitted to take the provisional license exam in 2 weeks, and you will have to hand in each a 10-page report on why it is a bad idea for civilians and hero students without a license to try and do hero work, as well as tying what you find with your own experience at the Battle of Kamino. This being said, you are not excused from the intensive training the others have to go though." Iida stepped forward and bowed. "We understand. Thank you for being lenient with us." Aizawa mentally snorted. "You'd wish for expulsion after I'm done with you. Good, as for the rest of you, the rules are simple. You can't leave the premises without approval from a teacher and without a hero escort. Everything you wish to buy will be brought to you, though fair warning, we will not be your maids. You will be expected to keep the dorms in order, wash your own clothes and iron them, as well as do your own dishes. There are separate bathrooms for boys and girls, and each several others for those of you with specific requirements." Aizawa sighed as he his mouth in his scarf. "Any other rules are in the binder on the table in the common room. Your curfew is at 11 p.m. Don't break it. Any questions?" Kaminari raised his hand. "Where are Bakugo and Midoriya?" This seemed to spark a wave of chatter through the students. Aizawa sighed again. Why was it that the universe was conspiring against him? It had been a long time since Izuku had stepped through the door of the Bakugo household. For all that their mothers had been friends, it would be hard to call Izuku and Katsuki's relationship as such. Still, there was a sort of camaraderie between them. even if it was buried underneath a decade of resentment and unresolved feelings that had been left to fester. And it seemed that those feelings have come back with a vengeance. It was hard to believe when Izuku had gotten that phone call from Aizawa that the Katsuki Bakugo, someone who had lived for the life of a hero ever since he was born, was now quitting the UA hero course. As much as he hated to admit it, a part of Izuku had wanted to tell him to go screw himself, to leave Katsuki be, and then later laugh in his face as the once pride of his middle school. A boy whom everyone thought would become great ended up as just another overworked salaryman. Izuku squashed those thoughts. He had thought that he would remove that darkness within himself if he denounced his ties with Katsuki, if he severed those bonds. Now, that very same stubborn bond was all that was keeping him sane, well, him and Melissa, but she was still several days away from landing in Japan. Moreover, her father was still under tight surveillance after he tried to pull the wool over the heads of Island with his quirk-boosting device. It was a marvelous invention, but the fact that it turns those who wear it into cripples made it more of a torture device than a support tool. Izuku knocked at the door before he could change his mind. It did not take long for Aunt Mitsuki to open the door. Even if the relationship between the two boys was strained, both Izuku and Katsuki would call one another's parents as their aunts and uncles. As the door was opened, Izuku was shocked by what he saw. She had been crying. Aunt Mitsuki had never been a crier. She was much like Katsuki in that regard. Tears for her were something rarely shed, and here she stood looking like she had been crying for the last 2 days. Izuku? She asked. Izuku couldn't help but swallow roughly as he became all too aware of what he was wearing. He still hadn't changed from his Mjolnir suit, and while he had cleaned it, it was nowhere near the pristine-looking suit it had looked like only 48 hours ago. If one looked close enough, one could see the scuffs and scratched on the metal plates, the marks of a weathered suit of armor, one that did its job and protected the wearer from harm. Still, he looked too much like the warrior that went up against all for one and not enough like the son that lost his mother. The only good thing about his attire was the jet black trench coat, hat and sunglasses let him move through the city mostly unimpeded. That, and they covered up most of the armor. He couldn't let Aunt Mitsuki see him like this armored demon that knew only vengeance. Hey, Aunt Mitsuki, words died in his mouth, not that it was unexpected. After all, what do you say to the woman that your mother considered to be her sister after your twin brother shoved a hand through said mother's chest, willingly or not? Katsuki, Mitsuki devolved into crying as she was gently pulled away from the door by her husband. Izuku, I'm glad you could make it. Please, come in. Masaru lead him inside as Mitsuki went off to another room. Izuku looked after her, if only to assure himself that she was still all right. You can sit, Izuku. We have some things to discuss, said Masaru. Izuku nodded and took the hat and sunglasses off his face. He couldn't but notice how Masaru's eyes scanned his metal-clad hands and deduced that he was still in his armor. It was strange. His uncle always took a backseat in their family dynamic. To see him take charge now. Is it that bad out there? He asked as he flicked his eyes in a meaningful gesture to his armor. I don't really know. I haven't been outside the hospital before now. Nisan, he still hasn't woken up, admitted Izuku. Masaru frowned a bit as he took his place on the couch in front of Izuku. That's unfortunate, he muttered. What happened with Katsuki? Asked Izuku. Masaru put the tea he was pouring down. He looked lost in thought. I don't know. After he came back, he's locked himself in his room all day and wouldn't see us. The only time he even spoke more than 2 words with us was when he told your teacher, Aizawa, that he was quitting UA and the hero course. Izuku swallowed hard. It was confirmation of everything he had feared. Can I talk to him? Asked Izuku. Masaru blinked at the request. Be my guest. I hope that you have more success than we had, said Masaru. A new wave of crying was heard throughout the house. Excuse me, said Masaru as he quickly ran to his wife's side, leaving Izuku alone on the couch. Was it strange to be afraid of a room? Probably, but then again, he hadn't been inside Katsuki's room in over 10 years. Standing here, like this, it seemed wrong. Still, he must do what needs to be done. He won't let Katsuki's dream end like this. He knocked. There was no answer. No screaming or threatening or anything like that, just silence. He didn't know what was more damning, the silence or the gut feeling he had that told him that something was wrong. He couldn't give up like this. He couldn't chicken out now of all times. Kachan, it's me, Deku. Using those old nicknames stirred up his feelings something crazy, but he couldn't back down now. After a few moments of silence, still nothing. Kachan? Katsuki, are you in there? This was begging to get worrying, so Izuku did what he always did when checking for people on the other side of a locked door. He stretched out his chakra and found nothing. Panic surged through his body and without even thinking, Izuku ripped the lock off the door with one for all and rushed inside, only to find windows opened and 2 neatly tucked letters on a desk. Shit, Izuku, I'm not normally this sappy, but I want to say that I'm sorry. I shouldn't have hurt you all those years. I don't know why I'm even writing this. You made it perfectly clear what you think of me. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. There is someone who can help me. Don't come after me. Don't try to find me, I'm not worth it. It's my fault that All Might and Auntie Inko died. It's my fault that Madara was forced to do what he did. I'm not a hero anymore, Izuku. I'm not worthy to go to UA. You know, funny thing is, until I saw All for One, until I saw you fight against the shits called the League of Villains, I couldn't for the life of me figure out what made you someone that All Might dotted on, but then again, I never knew or had what it takes to be a hero. Save everyone, one for all, successor of All Might. Katsuki Izuku balled his fists in fury, nearly ripping the paper those words were written on. That bastard, does he really think that a simple letter lets him off the hook? Folding the letter back, Izuku took the other letter and marched out of the room. Coming downstairs, he handed the piece of paper wordlessly to Masaru and stormed out. As soon as he was outside, he shrugged off his trench coat and with a burst of one for all and chakra he launched himself into the sky. Katsuki was smart. He was probably already out of his detection range and Izuku would admit that he wasn't the best of sensors, but he would be damned if he wouldn't find the fucker and beat him black and blue for what he pulled. Katsuki watched him passively as Izuku blasted off his parents' front porch and disappeared in the distance. He probably had an hour to get to where he was going before this whole area would be swarming with police. Katsuki took care to word his letter to his parents so that it could be considered a suicide note. Izuku's letter was a last-minute addition. He felt like he had to leave at least something for him. Any other path felt wrong. He couldn't falter now, he burned his boats, now he must move forward on this new path that he had chosen. It wasn't long before he found that old monastery. The old man was waiting for him outside. I'm ready. The heavy wooden doors opened, and he stepped through. Once they closed, the whole compound seemed to disappear and in its place all that remained was a large meadow. A high-tech plane made its landing approach at one of the nearby airports. Once it landed, the ground crew went to work on it. The door opened to reveal a staircase. A single woman exited. She wore a black shirt and pants that accentuated her physique. To the trained eye obvious muscles could be seen on her form and a skilled practitioner of the art of combat would instantly notice the otherworldly grace she moved with that denoted many years of hard practice to hone one's body to perfection. All this seemed to be in contrast with the friendly face she put on. Melissa's shield had arrived.